My grandma was the kind of person who could make a rough day pretty much feel lighter by just being in the room, and even though life hit her hard sometimes, she still carried this warmth that made everybody feel safe around her, and it made them feel cared for. I always knew if my grandpa told me I couldn't have another snack, all I had to do was look over at my grandma because she'd sneak me something anyway, with that little smile like she knew exactly what she was doing. She treated me like I mattered, like my thoughts mattered. And growing up with somebody who truly listened to you is something you don't fully appreciate until you get older and realize how rare that really is. My grandma, she understood me in ways that most people never did. And even when I struggled to explain myself, she somehow already knew what I meant without me needing to say much at all. She bought me Game Boys. When I was younger, she purchased them for me, and to some people that might sound like a gift, but to me it felt like love because she paid attention to the things that made me happy. And I mean, there were so many times where she would buy me Game Boys and just buy me different stuff, and like she pretty much spent all of her money on her grandkids, and it was just a really sweet thing in general. And I'm so grateful for that. And we just had so many good memories together. And some of my favorite memories are honestly just sitting around the house with her, eating snacks I probably wasn't supposed to have. Feeling completely comfortable and accepted for who I was. And even though she dealt with schizophrenia, she was still one of the sweetest people I've ever known. And that taught me that mental illness, it doesn't define whether somebody has a good heart or not. Despite her battles, she was still a really sweet person. And, I hate when people reduce someone down to their struggles because my grandma was so much more than what she went through. She was kind, she was funny, she was caring, protective, and deeply loving. And she always had this gentle side to her where you could tell she genuinely wanted the people around her to feel okay. And even when she herself might have been dealing with battles no one else could see. I mean, looking back now, I realize how lucky I was to grow up with somebody who made me feel understood instead of judged, because that kind of acceptance stays with you forever. She never judged, and she was always really sweet despite, being treated poorly sometimes and just going through all her mental health battles. She was such a nice person, and we have just like good experiences together, and great conversations. And we would dig out in her little garden. She had a little garden in front of her house, and we would dig in that garden and just have a really good time. She'd give us like spoons and little shovels, and we'd just sit out there and dig, and it was really fun. But my grandma had this comforting energy where even silence around her didn't feel awkward. It just felt peaceful, like everything was all right for a little while. I remember how excited I'd get whenever she surprised me with something small, because it wasn't even about the item itself. It was the feeling that somebody cared enough to think about me. And she was the type of grandma who made ordinary days feel special because, even she wasn't even trying, because her presence alone brought comfort into the room. And, there's something unforgettable about being loved by somebody who sees your flaws. They see your struggles, and they still choose to love you completely anyway. And I think one reason I loved being around her so much is because she never made me feel like I had to pretend to be somebody else to earn her love or approval. She gave me little moments of happiness as a kid that turned into lifelong memories. And I don't think she ever realized how much those moments would mean to me years later. Some people leave behind money or achievements, but my grandma left behind love, she left behind kindness, and memories that still stick with me every single day. And, I always remember how she would sneak me snacks like we were partners in crime. Because my grandpa was always like, yeah, you can't have those snacks, boy. And I was like, why can't I have the snacks? I was like, because I was always like hungry growing up, just growing and stuff like that just made me feel really hungry. And she would always give me those snacks. My grandma, she even showed me that even people going through difficult mental battles can still be incredibly compassionate and loving human beings. She wasn't perfect, but that's part of why I love her so much. And why I did love her so much is because she felt real. She felt human. She felt, vulnerable and honest in a world where so many people hide who they truly are. And there's just something special about the way she looked at me while she genuinely cared about my happiness and wanted me to enjoy being a kid. And she really did a good job for us grandkids. I did a little video where I was talking about the time that she made blackberry pie, and we went and she sent us on a little adventure to go gather blackberries, and we ended up having a really good pie because of that. When I think about my childhood, though, she's one of the first people that comes to mind because she played such a huge role in making those years feel warm and memorable. And I think every kid deserves somebody like my grandma in their life because, they deserve someone who makes them feel seen and cared for without conditions attached. And even the little things she did ended up becoming huge memories in my mind because love has a way of making small moments feel permanent. I still smile thinking about her sneaking me snacks behind my grandpa's back, because it felt like she was quietly on my side no matter what. And, she had her struggles, but despite everything she carried mentally, she still had this sweetness about her that people could feel immediately. And, my grandma taught me that kindness can survive even through pain, confusion, hardship, and all that stuff because, she never stopped being caring despite what she was dealing with internally. And she was generally just a really good person, and I'm so grateful to have had her in my life. And she taught me so much about life and just taught me how to be kind and the fact that you can still have mental illness and still be a good person, because I've had my own struggles with that, and it did cause me some struggles for quite a while. I mean, I'm doing better now, but any day, I could have a flare up of that and, go through some more struggle. I mean, that's just a part of having mental illness, but, I do the best that I can every day. And, she kind of taught me to be strong through mental illness. And, I just think about all the little things she did for me. And, I hold that deep in my heart with gratitude because having someone like that in your life is good for you. It's good to have that person that shows you compassion, that teaches you how to be kind and teaches you how to be a loving person. And that's gonna stay with me forever. But that's pretty much all I got. I hope you guys are having a good weekend. I hope you're holding on to hope, and I hope life's treating you well because you deserve to have a good day. You deserve to have good days. And I hope the content is kind of helping you guys. I've seen a lot of good comments from people that the content is helping. So yeah, I just wanted to yap a little bit about my grandma. I'll see you in the next one.